Welcome to the Classical Thinker Review, your source for independent political news. I'm Gilletta Jarvis, and today on our Candidate Spotlight, we will be speaking with Kim Ruff and John Phillips. Kim and John are running a joint campaign for the Libertarian Party nomination of presidential and vice presidential candidate. Welcome to both of you, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having us, Gilletta. I really appreciate it.
Yes, thank you.
Well, so tell us a little bit about yourselves and why you're running. Well, Kim, we'll start with you.
Yeah, John and I are both so excessively polite. We'll be like, no, you go. No, you go. No, you go. My name is Kim Ruff. I am 38 years old. I'm a native Arizonan, with the exception of about 18 months where I lived 6 months in Little Rock, Arkansas, and then a year in Lockport, New York. I've lived in the Phoenix metropolitan area my whole life. I'm married. I have 2 children. My daughter is 6 and my son is 5. I'm an operations director in a steel and plastic fabrication plant, and I'm a graduate of Arizona State University with dual baccalaureates in communication and political science.
And I'm John Phillips, and I currently live in Central Illinois in Decatur. I am married with 2 children as well. I currently own and operate a garage in Decatur. I have a background in multiple entrepreneurial endeavors, including transportation, restaurants, video stores, cyber cafes.
And you're a black belt.
Oh yes. I am a black belt in multiple styles, actually.
Wow. Okay, so we won't run into you in a back alley then. So why did you both decide to run for president and vice president?
Well, the reason why we decided to run is largely because we were so frustrated with how things unfolded in 2016. And we felt that we have kind of gotten to a position in the Libertarian Party where we're looking to have somebody from outside come in and then lead us to the promised land, as opposed to grooming and encouraging our own. So in order to kind of do the same and encourage people to get involved and take that leap and put themselves in the very difficult position of being a face-forward candidate, we thought we should do it ourselves. So that's kind of how we started. And our goal in this campaign is to represent the message unflinchingly, be honest about what libertarians are and what they believe and how that manifests into meaningful policy, and use whatever attention and finances we get to encourage our down-ticket candidates, support them, and get our volunteers galvanized on a local and state level.
Excellent.
So she covered that pretty well. There was a little frustration in when we bring these candidates in from outside, they don't always address the messaging in a way that would really indicate what the party stands for. And so we would like to present that message in a positive way.
Thank you very much. One of the things that I read from you both was that you described yourselves as radical and realistic. And I have to say, I love those terms together. Could you explain a little bit about what that means?
I'll let John tackle this first.
Well, it's very simple. We can have our radical ideals, but realize that, one, constitutionally and legally, there are limitations on what kind of actions we can take. And on top of that, what kind of actions we can actually accomplish. We can stand up here and say that we do support decriminalizing all drugs, but realize that we're probably going to have to start with marijuana. And so this is our goal, but this is our realistic expectation.
Correct. And the addendum to that too is that we recognize because we have this overarching goal of achieving unencumbered liberty in our lifetime, we will never compromise on that. So we will take any movement forward towards liberty, but we won't horse trade rights in order to get a concession in one area as opposed to another. So that's something that's really critical about our platform and positions.
For example, we're not going to say, hey, yeah, if you give us legalizing marijuana, we're going to give you some room on gun control. You know, we're not going to do that kind of trading. That's not pragmatic. That's selling out.
Exactly.
Excellent point. Excellent point. Thank you. Kim, one thing that you've stated is that you will fight for freedom via dance-offs. Now, obviously, that's a clarification of the word fight, as many people still are under this false impression that libertarians are advocates for the violent overthrow of the government. But can you tell us ways that as president, you would promote the freedom of people?
Okay. Well, there's a lot of stuff that you can do in your position that are within the scope of the office. So, as president, even though you are very limited constitutionally on what your role is and your responsibilities, you can still be a stalwart defender and advocate for freedom. And you can do so by using the bully pulpit. You can influence people to get involved on a local or state level by recognizing where your limitations are and where their power begins. So a good example is we actually had this discussion today on Twitter. Somebody asked what our opinion was on red flag gun laws. Now, red flag gun laws are situations, I think there's about 7 states that have these. And effectively what it says is that in these states, if there's a concern about an imminent threat from an individual, a person can get a restraining order against them that precludes them from acquiring a firearm. Now, we're running for a federal position. I'm running for president, John for vice president. That's not something that is within our purview. That's something that's the state to decide, like the individual states to decide, and the people in those states to either put forward a referendum to refer it back to the people so they can vote it down, go to their Supreme Court. Maybe they could partner with the ACLU and take it to the federal Supreme Court to challenge the constitutionality of it. But as far as our branch goes, that's not something we can do. But because we're cognizant of the limitations of our position and what people can do on a local and state level, we can always remind them, now here's what you can do. This is how you empower yourself. So that's something that's really critical and something we can definitely do.
Excellent. And John, one of the topics that you've been very outspoken on, and you actually spoke about it here, is the need for more positive messaging of the Libertarian Party, which is something that you've stated that you're hoping to do through this campaign. Could you give us an example of messaging that you feel people are just not hearing enough of?
Well, I'd like to go back. Honestly, if we go back to the Gary Johnson campaign and we go back to their town hall, and they kind of threw a surprise guest at him that, was like, oh, what about this policy about decriminalization of drugs? And all of a sudden he was backpedaling and looking weak. And, he was trying very hard. He got caught by surprise. I'm not holding that against him, but it would have been a very good opportunity to stand up and say, hey, here's why the criminalization of drugs is bad, the effects it has on society. And here are the positive things that happen in, say, Portugal when they did decriminalize it. And you've seen all these reductions in HIV rates, IV drug use, overdoses, all those kind of things. And so he could have responded to that woman and said, hey, I'm very sorry that your son passed away. Let me explain to you why that's the government's fault.
Right. And the addendum to that too, and we've talked about this, is that we look at our messaging strategy as similar to what documentaries typically do, which is they'll spend the first 3/4 of their film talking about all the things wrong with whatever issue they're discussing. But the last quarter before they ever let you go is they say, now here's what you can do. And they put that power back into people's hands. And by giving those tools and those resources to people, the words to their frustration, and then telling them how they can channel their frustration into meaningful action, that actually puts them in a more positive light, gives them power, and gives them hope, as opposed to just focusing on the negative.
And people are looking for somebody to listen to their problems and listen. Yeah. And so you listen and you hear their problems, you identify with their problems. You talked about how you can relate with their problems, which is something that Kim and I can both do. We're not some billionaire that doesn't understand how the regular person lives. And we can identify with that problem and build that relationship and then discuss solutions.
Exactly.
Excellent. Thank you both. So what I'd like to do now is just a quick fire round of 10 for or against topics so that people know where you stand on them. And afterwards, you can expand on any of them that you like. So I'm just going to say the topic, and you both tell me whether you're for or against it. Okay, ready?
Yes.
Okay, cannabis and hemp legalization.
For.
He's right.
Pardoning of nonviolent offenders.
Absolutely for.
It depends. Are they victimless crimes? We'll expand on it later.
Okay.
I'm for pardoning victimless criminals.
Okay, the border wall.
Against.
States demanding the right to declare their own independence.
Or
Okay. Universal health care.
against.
Against.
Universal income.
Against.
Universal education or free college for all.
Against.
U.S. involvement in foreign wars.
Against.
Civil asset forfeiture.
Against.
Federally mandated minimum wage.
Against.
All right, that was all 10. Okay, so on any of those 10 topics, if you'd like to expand on any of them, obviously, Kim, you'd like to touch on the pardoning of nonviolent offenders.
Well, this actually was something that we had kind of talked about initially, because when I wrote our platform on criminal justice reform, it was incredibly important for me to have anyone who was not responsible for committing a crime that caused a victim to be pardoned. And of course, being a federal position, it would be a federal crime, not something that's a state-based. That's up to the states to decide. But I had erroneously written nonviolent, but that excludes property crimes, and violations of property rights is hugely integral to libertarian platform and positions. So I actually have since clarified that what I mean is pardoning of people convicted of victimless crimes.
And see, I didn't make that clarification because to me, a property crime is a form of violence as a violation of the NAP. And so that's why, the little bit of a different answer there, but we mean the same thing.
Well played, John. That's a good answer.
Well, thank you for that clarification. That's what this time is for. Are there any of the other 10 topics you would like to expand on a little for our viewers?
John, do you want to take on the border wall since you wrote that awesome essay?
Yes, the border wall for sure we're totally against, not just because we're against walls in general, but because it didn't work. It's not going to work. All the reasons they give you for, this is why we need the wall is not going to affect. So not only is it not going to fix the problem, it's going to cost a bunch of money. And then you add the fact of how unlibertarian a wall is. I mean, I grew up during the Cold War, and we fought for years and years and years about, let's tear down this wall. And now we're going to go build one. How hypocritical are we?
Mm-hmm.
It's very interesting, and I don't mean to throw something into your campaign here, but for anyone who has ever watched, there's a show called Adam Ruins Everything. Have you ever? Okay.
Yes.
There is one of them that is on immigration, and they specifically talk about the border walls, including the border wall that's currently in existence. We have a wall that had started. And I would suggest to anybody who wants to know more about border wall protection and how it has affected immigration, they should definitely go and watch that episode. I don't remember what episode number it is, but it is the one that's on immigration.
We also, that article that she mentioned is actually on our website if anybody's looking to get a little bit more expansion on that.
Excellent. And that website should be here down below while I'm talking. It is Ruff Phillips 2020.com.
That's right.
.com. That's right. Any of the other topics?
Should we tackle universal health care since that's such a hot topic? Okay. All right, I'll take this one. So I just talked about this in another interview because in order to explain our position as libertarians, you almost have to go right down to the philosophy, which is we're advocates for negative rights, life, liberty, justly acquired property. That means that society, because there's always a duty associated with a right, society has a duty to not murder, not enslave, not steal from you. Now, with respect to positive rights, such as healthcare, that means that if you provide a positive right, society has a duty to make that happen. But then within there are all these questions of to what extent and how much, do we have any caveats or exceptions, and who's making that determination? So you, according to libertarian doctrine, you have a right to life, but you do not have a right to healthcare. It's not society's job to provide that for you, because in order to provide that for you, you are taking from their property, which is a violation of their negative rights, in order to make your positive rights happen.
And additionally, you have to enlist some sort of overseer or bureaucrat to make the determination about who gets what and to what extent. And it's never good. There's no competition, so there's no incentive for improvement in these products or services. And in effect, you end up destroying the marketplace of ideas and the free market of economics by having a government mandate to do this. So that's why we're vehemently opposed to universal health care.
In addition, the fact is that they can't do it right. If you look at, the Finnish government just folded over their universal health care program. But even now, the things they're trying to interfere with in healthcare now are reducing quality of care and raising costs. I mean, all their requirements for documentation and all the things they do. Doctors are, something like 48% of doctors are thinking about getting out of the field because they are not able to take care of their patients because of all these government mandates. Yeah. And that we don't even have universal health care yet. That's just a little bit of interference,
right.
So it's only going to get worse.
Yeah. What about, could you expand a little bit on universal income or the federally mandated minimum wage? That is a hot topic for people right now. They want to see those things happen. And you said for both of them, you're against them. Could you expand on why?
John, you want to take this as an entrepreneur?
First of all, the minimum wage is a artificial inflation mechanism, and it also places the much higher burden on small business than corporates. Everybody thinks, oh, Walmart's against raising minimum wage. Walmart doesn't care. Walmart does not care about minimum wage because they can make a little tweak here, a little tweak there. They can absorb that. And then guess what it does is it puts the mom and pop store down the street out of business because they have to raise prices to pay because they can't cut their staff anymore. They've only got 1 or 2 employees. Yep. And so then it puts them out of business, and then Walmart's, oh, well, we get even more business. Then it also negatively affects entry-level employment. As we see the kiosks appearing in McDonald's, and what people don't even think about, you always hear about the Democrat Party pushing these minimum wages, and we got to do it to benefit the minorities. First of all, that's a racist statement, but we'll leave that alone. Second of all, what they don't tell you is that it actually hurts the at-risk minority population more than it hurts anybody else. It increases dropout rates in poorer neighborhoods, and it decreases employment in those neighborhoods because those young children are now having trouble getting that McDonald's job because an adult's now taking it.
Those are very good points. And it doesn't, universal income is a separate creature, but related all the same.
Correct. Yeah, with universal basic income, what you're effectively doing is moving the floor up, but that's still the floor. So if everybody were to be bequeathed by the government, extra $10,000 a year or extra $1,000 a month or whatever it is that somebody's promising, all you're doing is effectively resetting where the bottom is. You're not changing the fact that there's a bottom. You're not changing the fact that there's economic disparity. You're just changing where the floor is. So if everybody had $1,000 at their disposal, it's not going to suddenly make it more economically viable. We're not going to have more disposable income in order to make more of a change in the marketplace. What we're doing is just resetting the floor. It's the same thing with wage ceilings, where you say like, this is a mandatory minimum wage. You're creating an artificial limitation or extent to which something can or cannot do. And in so doing, you preclude, there's a lot of unforeseen costs, basically. Like when he was talking about the minimum wage situation, if you say $15 an hour, well, that could be 2 people that you paid $7.50, but you don't see that one person who didn't get the job. You only see the one person who has the $15 an hour. So it's sort of the same thing. You're resetting, but you're not changing the disparity. You're not fixing the problem.
And then once again, it's an inflationary tactic. Anytime the government subsidizes anything, it causes inflation. That money's got to come from somewhere, number one, and so people raise their prices. But then what happens, especially, and it once again impacts the people at the bottom more than the people at the top, because the people at the bottom are sitting there going, okay, I'm struggling to make my rent. Great, I've got $1,000 more a month. And now their landlord's going, okay, well, I'm paying taxes to pay that $1,000 or more a month, so I'm raising your rent.
Exactly.
And so at the end of the day, and you see this repeatedly throughout history, if you study long-term economic trends, repeatedly over and over and over and over, at the end of the day, the people at the bottom of the ladder end up with less rather than more from these government interventions.
Right. How about we just trim their taxes? Then they'd have more money.
That would be a wonderful solution. Just less taxes. Let them keep more in their pockets. Okay, so moving on, I don't know which one of you wants to answer this, if you want to take some turns. What is your vision for the future should you be elected, and what's your plan for getting us there?
Okay. Do you want me to take this one, John?
Yeah.
Okay. So one of the things that we focus on in this campaign, and I mentioned a little bit earlier, is only what's within the scope of office that we're running for, recognizing that there are constitutionally defined limitations to what the president can or cannot do, to what the vice president can or cannot do, and functioning within those parameters only, which compared to what we currently have, where we effectively treat the president like a king and assume they can make decisions about everything, and they do try, we would have very limited scope. But we would have the opportunity in such a high profile office and position to use our position to continue the education and to continue discussing these ideas and hopefully encourage a socio-political sea change where we move more toward liberty and away from the far left movement that we've taken on. So there's that aspect. Were we in that position? On the way to that position, what we're focusing primarily on is using our role and responsibility as candidates to talk about libertarianism and represent it accurately and without apology, so that our down ticket candidates who have a much higher probability of being elected and can affect positive change, meaningful change in their local or state area, will not have to become functional apologists for us, will not have to spend their time on the campaign trail re-explaining what libertarian actually means and re-explaining what those viewpoints actually are. So we'll do that. And on top of that, we've also pledged that of the money that we receive in donations, 10% of it, full stop, will be shared with down ticket candidates to help fund their campaigns and encourage them, because they really are the ones who are going to make a significant difference. Do you have more to add, John?
You covered it pretty well. The only thing we do, as in addition as to our constitutional limited authority, as she discussed, is absolutely what a lot of people, there are things that we can do within that limited authority. I mean, everybody worries about executive orders, but executive orders aren't necessarily a bad thing if you're doing it to reduce oversight somewhere else. Like currently, right now, did you know that there's a Social Security policy right now? It's just in their administration. It's not a law that if you do Social Security, you have to take Medicare, and if you don't, they won't let you. They won't let you take Social Security, and then if you drop Medicare later, they'll make you pay it back. And all that would take from that is an executive order from the president to say, okay, hey, that policy is not okay. You need to reevaluate that, because
right.
it's set by administration that is under his authority.
Right.
Excellent. And could you tell us anything else about your campaign that would help differentiate you between the other people running for the office, for the nomination of the office?
John, do you want to tackle why we're running as a slate?
Yeah, let's start with, that's a good place to start. We are running as a slate. I've talked about this several times, and honestly, the first reason is because it is more financially responsible. Kim can handle one place, I can handle another. We're not flying 2 people to Florida. We're not flying 2 people to Illinois. We're not, those kind of things. The other thing is it really becomes easier as we work together to develop that message in conjunction. We can bounce ideas off each other, and I can throw this thing out and she can throw that thing out, and we can say, okay, that works, but we need to change this word here, or we need to change that word there, and we can really tweak that positive messaging.
Excellent. Kim, did you have anything to add to that?
No, not necessarily. Just to clarify the process within which the candidates are picked by the delegates for your listeners who aren't cognizant of it, which is at the Libertarian National Convention, they are chosen separately. So it's entirely possible and potentially probable that John and I won't necessarily both be picked if any of us get picked. You never know. So we're aware of that, and we pledge at the start of this campaign that whatever comes to pass, should he get selected and not I, or should I get selected and not he, that we would pull our weight and continue to move this campaign forward to support whomever is. And that our campaign is built, the infrastructure that we've developed has been built to transcend the life of campaign. So even after we're done, all the resources, all the knowledge, all the media contacts, all the finances that we've acquired, all that stuff will still be in place, and we'll roll it into possibly like a 501c3 nonprofit to continue to assist, because the truth of the matter is that John and I are activists first. We've been doing this for 10 years each. We both have been in the trenches for a very, very long time. So it's hugely critical to us to continue to maintain that relationship and assist where we can, however we can.
Well, I commend you both on how well you work together. You, as you said in the beginning, you're very polite to one another. Neither one of you is looking to be the dominant voice. It definitely looks like a team effort, and that's something that's kind of refreshing when you're looking at presidential and vice presidential campaigns. So I commend you on that.
Thank you. He's a good yin to my yang and vice versa.
Well, thank you both so much for joining us today. Good luck on your campaign. I look forward to seeing you in 2020 down in Texas. And I hope that everyone takes the opportunity to view this video, to give it some serious consideration, and to look at the information provided by your opponents in the race, and to think more about the Libertarian Party and what the message is that they're trying to tell you. And thank you all for joining us today at the Classical Thinker Review.
Thank you, Gilletta.
Thank you so much, Gilletta. We appreciate it.
Thank you.